Hello and welcome to the 13th live stream of the 18th Brumaire. We are going to finish chapter 6. We're on the home straight now. We're going to mill through it. Today we have got quite a full panel. Reasonably full. Okay, who will we go with? Let's go all the way down to the mangroves of southern Arizona. We've got who do we have? We've got Sophia and Esri. How's it going?
Oh, hi.
We don't live in southern Arizona.
Well, what part of Arizona do we live in? Where did I move?
Oh,
You moved to Phoenix.
Oh, yes.
It's in the middle.
Right. Yeah, we're just chilling with our novelty AK-47, novelty Hello Kitty AK-47, ready to fight off all the reactionaries in the U.S. Army.
Ready to fight off all the reactionaries in the U.S. Army with their upper stratosphere nukes.
We had a great conversation about how the government can nuke us from space, and we were corrected that technically their nukes only travel in the upper stratosphere.
By the brilliant Tom O'Brien, military tactician.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm feeling the rev in my heart today. It feels more possible than
Hello
ever
Kitty
right
versus nukes. We got this.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for reintroducing that dumbass conversation into the live stream.
I'm sorry. I just couldn't help it. I just was thinking about the, just like little cute, like chibi anime trans girls with like AK shooting at a nuke coming from space. I don't know. Like it was stuck in my brain.
Okay, now next we have all the way from the beaches of Idaho. We have Hellfire and Varn Nation. How's it going, Derek?
Hi, I'm from the beaches of Idaho, aka Utah.
Idaho. Did I say Idaho? I did.
Yeah, but it's right next door. They're full. Okay. They're both full of Mormons. It makes sense. I'm doing pretty good. I've already yelled at Tom off mic, so there'll be less bullying today. And the normal and the great Scotch-Irish battle over historical settler colonialism will be. We're gonna form a united front against the rightist in our midst.
We'll see if this lessens the bullying. We'll see.
Yeah. Against the reactionaries on this pod who have yet to be identified. Okay,
right. We're gonna smoke them out.
Smoke out the bastards. Okay, last but not least, we have all the way from Alberta, Kyle. How's it going?
Yeah, doing okay. Up here at the north end of Mormon land. Also have beaches here. They're artificial, but they exist. I didn't know I was signing up for a struggle session today, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Is there actual Mormons up there?
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Seriously?
Time.
Wow.
Yeah. They've got like a whole like cathedral that you can't go in unless you do XYZ.
I've been into one of those, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
You have?
Wow.
Ooh, did you get the special underwear?
Did you smoke a blunt?
No.
Oh.
Did you do a satanic ritual?
Believe it or not, if you live in Utah, I'll tell you the real story behind it. If you live in Utah and you have a Mormon friend, when they rechristen a temple or re-solemnize it, there's a time period where they let the heathens in. And I just wanted to go because I figured it's secret. It's going to be cool. I'm going to find out about the weird Mormon sect cult that they all have been hiding from us. And it's really fucking boring. It's like Judaism as imagined by a Freemason through a shopping mall.
Yeah, no, that's legit. I visited the Mormon temple, on the outside, and I can vouch that is definitely that is a right. You know what? We all live in Mormon country.
We all live in Mormon country,
with the exception of Tom.
Yep.
So.
Although
enjoy your hot drinks, people.
So Mormon country actually extends all the way from Chihuahua in Mexico up through.
Chihuahua's a dog. It's not a place. Chihuahua's a dog.
Chihuahua is a dog named after a place or a place.
I know that.
So up through Chihuahua and the southern desert. Those are the real crazy Mormons too. Those are the Mormons that are so intense that they didn't even stay with the fundamentalists in America. They went to Mexico to be left alone. Occasionally they get killed by cartels.
No.
So,
God,
wow.
Those are the people that still have blood atonement and shit. It's awesome.
I met some Mennonites in Uganda. How does that fit?
Oh, there was when I lived in northern Mexico, different part in the High Sierras. There was tons of Mennonites. In fact, all the blonde people in the area, they would call them Mennonistas because they thought that they must be Mennonites because that's what it meant to be blonde. So it was kind of fun.
That rolls.
Okay. Now we've got through all of that. Oh, my mate worked as an electrician in New York, and he got a job doing the Scientology headquarters. And he said it was so fucking freaky that he couldn't let he was like the head electrician. There was two other fellas doing some work, and he said he didn't feel right leaving the boys there on their own to do it. It was that fucking. He said it was like eyes wide shut. So he stayed there all the time with them so they could do it.
That's what I was hoping the Mormon temples were going to be like, but didn't get any of the fun stuff.
No.
Damn.
Scientology is where the real fun shit happens. We all know that.
I did a runner from a Scientology museum in LA one time. I got freaked out. I was full on for going in taking the piss, and they melted my brain within minutes. The three of us ran out through a fucking fire escape to get out of this fucking museum.
I used to live down the
4chan.
street from the Scientology headquarters in Salt Lake City when I first moved here. So that was my introduction to America again after being abroad for 10 years. It's like, oh yay, Mormons and Scientology. It's good to be home.
I think the Scientologists got ran out of Ireland. They don't have an office in Dublin anymore. That's pretty good.
That's fucking legit.
That's legit.
Yeah, good for
but I
you.
could be wrong with that. But the one where it was is gone anyway.
Good, proper working class Catholic reactionaries. You got to give them credit.
That's what we want.
There you go. Yeah.
The home of Edmund Burke. The home of Edmund Burke.
We have our own centralized sex cult here. Thank you very much. We don't need another one.
Yeah.
Chuck Yarla.
Who's in charge of this sex cult? Hey, it can't be me. So then I'm complaining because I've gotten fuck all out of it. That's all I'm saying. Right. Right.
So Kyle, how are we going to start a cybernetic sex cult? Because that sounds cooler.
That's really good.
I think
Five.
Scientology is way ahead of us on that one.
Oh, they take cybernetics principles and mix it with the Lima.
I just figured they're from California, so they must have gotten their brain at some point.
No, you see, this is still the British's fault. Scientology is because it's like L. Ron Hubbard hung out with Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley, and redressed all that weird occult shit in alien language. And I know a lot of like Thelemites and shit, which were also in California because that's where weird shit goes to be weird. They're also weirdly like Scientology adjacent. It's very strange.
It's tragedy. It's like Mirror Universe, like Roddenberry picking up Posadism, like it's just sad.
Yeah.
Makes my heart ache.
Apparently for but the grace of God and a few $1,000s go I.
Yeah. Well, remember, the secret is don't pay any of your workers.
Yeah. Okay, let's get going. Last time, which is probably about 6 weeks ago, I think, or maybe even 2 months ago, when we did the last recording before I went to Ireland, was we had just done the what had we just done? Okay, where I think Bonaparte had just done he tried to get them to vote on reintroducing full suffragism. Am I right about that? Let me just I think they just got rid of fuck it. Does anyone remember what happened? Let's keep going. Anyway.
Okay,
this is history.
I'll do the intro again when I listen to the last fucking last bit of the last one. But at this point here, universal suffrage is gone, and the well, does anybody remember what the fuck happened in this chapter? Kyle, do you remember what we last did in this chapter? The first bit.
What we last did? Oh
yeah,
boy,
it's
Tom.
so long.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
It's been since the 1870s,
Yeah.
So okay. I think there's the whole question about the party of order trying to come together and then failing to do so.
Yeah, it's split. Napoleon successfully split them. Yeah.
Well, they
Yeah.
split themselves as well, but yeah.
Right. Mark
Okay,
has this great point about the logic of each party not really being able to coalesce. So it'd really just be the Orleanists capitulating to the Legitimists.
Okay,
Then
yeah.
there's the whole thing about the bourgeoisie being like, hey, we could totally run Cavaignac, but you know what? Maybe we'll just ostrich it up and not. And then, so instead of pulling the only thing that we can do to prevent a dictatorship, fuck it. Why don't we just hide instead of doing that? And then
it was also the part where like the Party of Order and the two different wings were constantly trying to figure out could they one of the things was could they take turns with having the presidency and have it like flipping from one house to the other, different sections of the party, and neither could agree on that. And so the bourgeoisie were now looking on the Party of Order as too split to be any good. And we're just about to start this bit here where they basically come out and they receive Bonaparte well and give out about the Party of Order. So I think that's the part where we're at too. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start here. Kyle, you're our resident bloviator. Is that no, that is an insult. Good reader. There we go. Now, do you want to start?
Actually speaks French.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Tom means.
That's
Their
what I
direct
mean.
translation.
All right. Okay. So let's see here. Where we started, the department councils.
The department councils until the bourgeois mass itself.
All right. The department councils, those provincial representative bodies of the big bourgeoisie, which met from August 25th on during the recess of the National Assembly, declared almost unanimously for revision, and thus against Parliament and in favor of Bonaparte. Still more unequivocally than in its falling out with the parliamentary representatives, or with its parliamentary representatives, the bourgeoisie displayed its wrath against its literary representatives, its own press. The sentences to ruinous fines and shameless terms of imprisonment on the verdicts of bourgeois juries for every attack of bourgeois journalists on Bonaparte's usurpationist desires, for every attempt of the press to defend the political rights of the bourgeoisie against the executive power, astonished not merely France, but all Europe. While the Parliamentary Party of Order, by its clamor for tranquility, as I have shown, committed itself to quiescence, while it declared the political rule of the bourgeoisie to be incompatible with the safety and existence of the bourgeoisie, by destroying its own hands in the struggle against the other classes of society, all the conditions for its own regime, the parliamentary regime, the extra-parliamentary mass of the bourgeoisie, on the other hand, by its servility towards the president, by its vilification of parliament, by its brutal maltreatment of its own press, invited Bonaparte to suppress and annihilate its speaking and writing section, its politicians and its literati, its platform and its press, so it would then be able to pursue its private affairs with full confidence in the protection of a strong and unrestricted government. It declared unequivocally that it longed to get rid of its own political rule in order to get rid of the troubles and dangers of ruling. And this extra-parliamentary bourgeoisie, which had already rebelled against the purely parliamentary and literary struggle for the rule of its own class, and had betrayed the leaders of this struggle, now dares after the event to indict the proletariat for not having risen in a bloody struggle, a life and death struggle on its behalf. This bourgeoisie, which every moment sacrificed its general class interests, that is, its political interests, to the narrowest and most sordid private interests, and demanded a similar sacrifice from its representatives, now moans that the proletariat has sacrificed its ideal political interests to its material interests. It poses as a lovely creature that has been misunderstood and deserted in the decisive hour by the proletariat, misled by socialists. and it finds a general echo in the bourgeois world. Naturally, I do not speak here of German shyster politicians and riffraff of the same persuasion. I refer, for example, to the already quoted Economist, which as late as November 29th, 1851, that is 4 days prior to the coup d'etat, declared Bonaparte to be the guardian of order, but Trier and Bellier to be anarchists. And on December 27th, 1851, after Bonaparte had quieted these anarchists, is already vociferous about the treason to the skill, knowledge, discipline, spiritual insight, intellectual resources, and moral weight of the middle and upper ranks, committed by the masses of ignorant, untrained, and stupid prolétaires. The stupid, ignorant, and vulgar mass was none other than the bourgeois mass itself.
I love it.
Dang.
I love it. Very frank.
I really love like The Economist calling Trier like an anarchist.
Oh my god.
After like the July like 1830 revolution was squashed and he was put in as like the lead figure. I don't know, like it just God. You can really feel the derangement. Like we're always looking for parallels between this and that, like this time and that and that time, that the time we're in and the time we're reading about. And the more I read about this, like it seems like the way the class forces stack is very different. But what isn't different is total bourgeois derangement, and that's very entertaining.
Yeah, you know what's interesting to me about this, because this is a text that I actually think a lot about, is like, we get Bonapartism obviously comes from this text, right? But like, do we have a good theory about why this happens so often? Like a good like humanist but functional structural, I'm going to say functional structural, not to be confused with Althusserians, functional structural theory of what all this means, like why this happens so much. I mean, the weird thing, for example, in America, this does happen, but it only seems to happen like in cycles of like 90 years, like every two. I guess maybe Reagan is this light, but it wasn't like it. You don't see the kind of stuff that you see now, where you actually have like open corruption in courts and stuff like they're describing here, and we have stuff like that.
Go ahead. Oh, the only thing I was talking last night with Esri about how like I was just trying to sound out like what the differences are and what the similarities are. One of the differences is that like when I think of the people who support Trump now, for example, I don't. I think of the petite bourgeois largely because based on what I've read recently, it seems like a lot of the big bourgeois are supporting Biden. But then I really thought about it. Like one of the key differences now is like how big the petite bourgeois is compared to how big it was here in the time of this text. And I think one of the big differences in my experiences of living in like rural Arizona and living in Phoenix, the more urban part of Arizona now, is that I think it's a divide between rural and urban PBs, right? Because you get like the guy who owns the mechanic shop out in like the outskirts who also works there. And he's talking about how like he doesn't even like really care that much about Trump or politics. He just like wants things to be calm so he can work and make money. That's it. He wants to keep care of his family, and he's like buys into all this scaremongering about protesters. Whereas you get kind of like urban hipster PBs who want to make a big show of supporting Black Lives Matter so that they don't get their doors kicked in and they can maintain business.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's a long way of saying that we don't have like a humanist, structural, functional, like good theory of Bonapartism, but like it's just sort of like reappearing tendencies that like affect different parts of the bourgeoisie in different ways. Like
I don't think it's a rational process either, because like what ends up happening here is that the bourgeois outside of politics, some form of it, whether it's PB or not, the bourgeois outside of politics wants to end its political representation and just allow a strong man to get shit to run, right? To make the trains run on time, to make sure they could get their goods and services done. That's it. And I think what it boils down to, maybe the structural kind of theory behind this, is the process of political management distracts from the process of profit making. And
so actually, there is a person who has a theory on this, and I'm going to state it, but it's not a Marxist theory. It is a class theory. It's not a Marxist theory. There's the kind of center liberalish. Sometimes he's kind of on the conservative side. Right now, he's actually flirting with social democrats. Michael Lind. And Michael Lind has a theory of what he calls the overclass, which is PB, small level professionals, and then large professionals who serve the bourgeois. And he basically says that if you look at left liberalism in America and right and conservatism, right liberalism in America, you have the PB who are being proletarianized, and ironically, because they're being proletarianized, they're actually hostile to state intervention, because anything on the tax margin actually reduces their profits significantly, because they are being subjected to declining profit rates in a bigger way. Whereas these larger, more professionalized areas have monopoly capital pull. And all these servicing areas, they're actually going to be very amenable to the state taxing high because they need it and they're willing to pay it to keep their jobs because the cost payoff is better. But that, to me, that explains now in the United States, and we can re-Marxify that if we want to. I think there are ways to do that. But that dynamic didn't entirely exist in France at the time. And so I can't use it to retroject back to then, except that there does seem to be some issue between the rural and urban class interests that we don't deal with, that goes back to even before this, goes back to the 1848 revolution, because you could get even the proletariat in the rural areas to kind of side against the urban proletariat consistently.
Well, I was going to say that yeah, more or less the same thing. That my intuition as to why the PB is going for Trump, and for sort of in the most obvious way, whereas the big bourgeoisie, like I was reading recently about the way in which the sort of classic Bush bourgeois voter, or the people in big energy and oil, the blue chip stock owners or executives in America, are going Democrat in a big way, and like they're going for Biden, and the Biden strategy has been very successful in courting that demographic. Is that like the PB have much smaller reserves, and are just in a much more precarious position than the big bourgeoisie, as you were saying, like monopoly capital, quote unquote. They don't have the reserves to ride this stuff out, or they're afraid they don't have the reserves to ride this stuff out. Whereas the big bourgeoisie are like, yeah, there's unrest, but the sort of big unrest of mismanagement is a bigger threat to them, or bigger annoyance to them, than the unrest on the streets. That doesn't matter so much to them.
So like the big bourgeoisie at this time were less established, had less had less reserves, like they hadn't completely displaced the aristocracy in an important way. And then 200 years later, those people are basically fine, and they can run companies that aren't profitable for 15 years or something and just be fine. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's part of it. I mean, I've been doing all this
I don't know.
I've been doing all this study on like the relationship between the bourgeoisie's and monopoly capital, and social democrats mistaking monopoly capital for another podcast too I won't name so that Tom won't rant about it. And
Come on.
and I've also been doing, I'm writing a book on Christopher Lasch, who was pointing out some of these problems actually in the 60s, that there's a tendency of left liberals as early as the 1950s to in America to try to promote monopoly capital. And he went through and showed that this was a tendency going back to Roosevelt, because the laissez-faireism had, like, true laissez-faire economics in America had failed in the Long Depression, like as early as 1890, like really. And we haven't really done true laissez-faire since. And neoliberalism is not true laissez-faire. I mean, like, anyone who studied it knows that. So we're in this period where there's been a shift. But what's interesting about, like, reserves, right? Both, if we look at real reserves, nobody right now actually has reserves. What monopoly capital has is political clout, because if they fail, you have social collapse.
Right.
But they do have reserves. Like, a lot of these big IT companies have massive reserves.
Yeah,
Like,
but IT
Apple
doesn't
has-
really run.
Has
IT
$1 trillion in reserves sitting. Loads of the big corporations have.
How much of that is
large
fictitious
reserves.
capital, though?
It's
Yeah, a lot of
capital
that's
to the-
finance.
No, a lot of
Like,
that is
a lot of that
earnings.
is like a
A lot of
financial, like,
No, a lot of that is earnings. It's where they place their earnings. Like, like, even we're talking about ones like they're placing their earnings made on monopoly. So like Apple and the iPhone,
Okay.
they're storing their profits, like literally
Yeah,
in hedge funds in Ireland. That's what they're doing.
Big Four, very tippy top of the pyramid. You're correct. For the entire rest of the big bourgeoisie,
Also, what you're describing, by the way, are companies that live off monopoly IP, which are rents. They're not actually living off of commodity production in a real way. They're not living off real commodities.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I said that explicitly. But like,
Right,
so
but the real commodities still drive the economy. You can't do that on a non-commodity economy. Like, there's no way to do that. I don't know why. I don't really deny, but like, I'm not denying that
you're getting it from somewhere in the world system, but you don't care where it's coming from. But they are,
right.
They have them, and the big monopoly powers like Google and Facebook and these, they have loads of money sitting there. I think that's why. Like, I think I nearly look at what you guys and girls are saying, is that I look at it nearly the opposite of what Kyle was saying. I think, like, if you're a petty bourgeois, you're a shop owner on the street somewhere in America, and all this protesting is going on, and you don't want that protesting, and you want, like, things to go back to normal, you're more likely to get at least a temporary return to normality through Biden. I don't see that the vote for Trump as being somehow trying to get over this short term and get the stuff done or anything. I don't see that as being a rational decision.
It depends on where you're at in the United States. That's why the rural urban stuff is really important. Like, I actually do think that's a dynamic that most people who don't live in the States kind of miss. The Biden economy would be a return to a normal petit bourgeois economy. And most of those people, like most of the shop owners here, are probably Democrats. Like, when you look, however, at the rural and ex-urban economy, that economy is more decimated. The tax structures are more a threat to it because they have lower profit margins. And I don't really buy the cultural thesis that it's all rural conservative culture buying it, because honestly, in America right now, if you look at the working class that's more conservative and you break it up by race, what race is going to be the most culturally conservative? It's not white people. The Pew backs that up. Nope. It's actually mostly new Latino immigrants, but they're not voting cultural conservative. They're not. They're either not voting or they're voting with on Democrats because their economic interests override their cultural concerns. And I think for most people that's true.
So what explains the petty bourgeois Trump stuff, if only they're going to get tax cuts that they think they won't get from the Democrats?
It's largely that, because think about it. Like, when we're talking about the rural, like, petite bourgeois, we're talking about petite bourgeois in what could be considered the periphery of within his country, right? So, like, they have a lower income base, and so taxes, which generally Democrats have a higher tax base, will decimate them more. Whereas, it doesn't affect as much. If I'm understanding Derek correctly, I think that's basically correct.
And also,
It's
they're
not
in
just
a higher tax bracket too. In America, for example, if you're a
Mhm.
low income but a business owner,
Mhm.
you get hit harder by
Yeah.
taxes than the big bourgeoisie do. The big bourgeoisie will actually sometimes even call for higher taxes. The really big bourgeoisie, and here I'm not even talking about Google and whatnot. I'm talking about the investor class, like Berkshire Hathaway, and the people who, if they didn't give their money away, would still be the richest people in America. They call for this because they know they can take it. Like, they're actually somewhat concerned about the nature of the tax structure in America falling disproportionately on a group that's going to become super reactionary. I mean, I remember Warren, not Elizabeth Warren, Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. Yeah.
I call him Uncle Warren because I worked for him in the early aughts.
Were you a rent boy?
Sort of. Good old Uncle Warren. I was an insurance salesman. Good old Uncle Warren.
Same thing.
Yeah, exactly. We got to prosecute ourselves out for something, right? So
sex work. We got to sex work ourselves for something. Okay, we're refined individual.
I'm sticking with rent boy for Derek. For Derek, it's rent boy.
Yeah, for Derek, the politically correct term is rent boy.
All right. So you see these calls because I think Warren Buffett understood as early as the early Bush administration that this was going to destabilize his investment order because populism. I mean, I'm bringing up Michael Lim. Michael Lim has a quote that populism will always become reactionary over time because it is always reacting. It has a very basic, it has a very simpleton economic understanding of economic interest. It does actually have one in some ways more immediate and visceral than Marxists do, but it's very like one-to-one. If you read again, I hate to be pimping Christopher Lash's early work, but Christopher Lash in The Agony of the American Left actually spells this out, traces how when the American left went from populism to Marxism and why populism started getting into weird conspiracy theories and which by the way are rapping on the left and right now, as we were talking about before the show, which is a sign of degeneration. While that's happening, is that you don't really that's always an inherently reactionary thing. It might not be reactionary in the sense that it always goes right wing, but if you just want to break so that you can quit hemorrhaging your profits, you want two things. You want deflation and you want low taxes. And 3% inflation, moderated inflation, has been liberal monetary policy across the board by the establishment for forever. Forever being back into the late 60s, if I'm really going to be honest. And tax rates that are really actually kind of nice if you're super rich, but really hard on you if you make, say, between $60,000 and $90,000 a year. Particularly if you make it self-employed, because you're going to get hit by self-employment tax. It's a reactionary feature that I don't think Marxists really look at, because we kind of give liberal hopes on tax structure a pass. Remember, at this time, this is a time period where Marx was like speaking out against the income tax, even after he advocated it in the manifesto. Like, he was speaking out against it at this time for those reasons.
Yeah, this is in liberal talking points in progressive circles known as the middle class tax burden, right? Like, of course, liberals want to, up progressive income tax and, whatever. Like, however you want to actually solve that problem, like when you actually look at tax structure, that is the bump that you tend to see. There's a disproportionate taxes on those small bourgeoisie, which kind of drive them wild. But I don't know. Here, the petty bourgeoisie again are what were they, like the social democrats? Mm-hmm. And so that's very different. I guess if we're tracking our situation and the situation here, and we want like some general kind of like structural functional theory, like I guess the big factor is the displacement of aristocracy by big bourgeoisie, like, and this, the however you want to frame it, the going from formal to real subsumption, whatever, like the setting in of capitalism as the ancien regime, like in a big formal, centuries long way.
So we shouldn't expect this to map directly on to now, even, because we don't have that same dynamic.
No, I think
but
that
we-
I think that what we
Structure.
see right now is in America, it's like the agenda of the Party of Order is kind of split. Like so you listen to what people are saying on Wall Street, and they're fed up with Trump. They find his just sort of mercurial randomness infuriating because they don't know how to place bets. They don't know what's going to happen because Trump is so unpredictable. And so actually Trump for them does not represent order, right? He represents chaos. And they don't want that. So they want Biden because he's going to bring order. And, it's partially the same thing for sort of the blue chip CEOs. They also just find Trump to be distasteful. Like, we don't do politics that way, kind of never Trump stuff. And they're going to Biden for that. But when it comes to the question of the Party of Order cracking down on protests in the streets, Biden is trying to make himself credible on that point, but Trump is pushing harder on it and is actually doing the same thing we see here, where like The Economist is calling Trier an anarchist, right? Like he's saying that Biden is secretly being manipulated by communists, right?
Right.
Like, that kind of slander is in the air. So I think that the Party of Order agenda is split here. We see the sort of like regulating the economy, creating financial stability being claimed by Biden, and then the question of law and order punishment is more being claimed by Trump. And then when you look at the question of who controls the state and regulation, maybe it's the case that, the petty bourgeoisie in these ex-urban and rural areas see with Trump that they might have a chance to wrest some regulatory and state power out of the hands of the people who usually control it, which is the big bourgeoisie and, the clients of the Democratic Party to some degree, right? So,
But
yeah.
Kyle, opposed to that last bit, you're saying like Trump has just handed the keys over to big corporations. It's not like he's had mom and pop stores give them the keys. He basically is, he's got all the same Wall Street hacks in there.
He does, but he supports tariffs, which is something that also has a lot of say with these rural ex-urban petit bourgeois. He supports a very punitive immigration regime, but that still allows a lot of people in, believe it or not. And that's because that gives a lot of like the ranchers and stuff a lot more control, as long as ICE doesn't overstep their bounds, which occasionally they do, and then the ranchers turn back to start considering the Democrats. I've actually seen that happen. Out here in the West, it's a much liver issue. The thing that I think that we have to like grok a little bit about the dysfunction of order right now is the Party of Order. I don't want to sound like a deep state conspiracist, but there is a sense in which like the mainstream is the Party of Order, and it is a bipartisan functionary consensus of which they have believed, we'll let you have your Bernie and whatever as long as you don't actually win. And we go to sensible, and we'll even find the most we'll find the most progressive pro cop, person of color, effective. Like this was hilarious that someone said this was a liberal said it. I think on the Slate Political Gabfest or whatever, that like Mike Pence and Kamala Harris are actually like the perfect median upscale version of the voter bloc for their constituencies. And so like you'll see a return to cultural war politics stuff. I mean, and in some ways, the BLM stuff, and this is where I'm going to sound super cynical, is really good for Biden in a lot of ways because you can crack down on it and appease it at the same time.
Yeah, this
It's Obama and Occupy.
Exactly.
Obama and Occupy all over again.
Yeah, but ironically though, like, there is like an appeal that, some people think that Trump's going to bring order. But the funny thing is, like, Democrats are running one of the most like racially charged pro-cop tickets that they have in like a very long time.
Yeah.
During a, militant black response to the Trump administration, partially in hopes of flanking Trump to his right and appealing to law and order. And so that's the kind of funny thing about that like this
they are trying
way that
to
the narrative's
coalesce,
unfolding right now.
They are trying to coalesce a party of order ticket. Like they want the suburban Republicans to come to them and create a grand coalition In the name of order. Right. That's their strastrategy.
Yeah. And Trump's strategy is for every every one of those Republicans the Democrats get, I'll get a couple of more racists. That's his strategy.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing is you look at Trump's law and order strategy. It actually deliberately creates chaos.
Yeah,
100%. And so it is a strategy based on exacerbating the fears of rural and urban tensions in a way that like actually is destabilizing in a big way. And it's talked about all the time in like centrist circles, both right and left, about how I mean, like, otherwise the fucking Lincoln Project wouldn't be a thing. Like, you want to talk about the party of order. Like, the fact that, like, not only has the whole Bernie DSA movement become irrelevant, that we're literally in a world where the political landscape seems to be between the Lincoln Project and QAnon.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a classic Bonapartist move, though, right? Is provoking chaos so as to move in to stop it.
Yeah, and I would think there's also, Derek, when we're talking about that concept of folding, like, this kind of contradiction of the Biden, that he'll be the law and order candidate and also appease the Black Lives Matter thing at the same time. But that trick that Obama did with like Occupy, I feel your pain, and now hits him over the head. Now I feel how I see your pain, even more of it. But like I don't know if that I think that Biden will not be able to fold in that into the same way as Obama did. I think that the class situation and everything that's gone on since will make this him unable to do that. So I think that's what it is kind of maybe confusing the bourgeoisie a bit. They don't seem to have an obvious good route at the moment.
No, but
it seems like there's a precedent for whenever like a center left kind of party or even like a social democratic or communist party tries to flank the right from the right, they trip on the way and fucking fail, right? Like that seems to be the thing. Now, there's a lot about this that is a lot of bets are off right now, I would say, politically, so I wouldn't be like super surprised if Biden could pull it off, but I think there's a lot about Biden that people are just not excited about for a lot of different reasons. And they're kind of, as far as like engagement with like their base, like they're kind of just like relying on the fact that he was the VP for Obama and liberals love Obama. So maybe that will work.
Well, I mean, maybe if Biden calls in, the military on protesters, the military would listen. Like that's the major. I feel like at this point, that and feeling more woke about it because you get the, Black Lady Cop VP. Like those are the twin appeals there. Is
Well,
that you
you
can
also,
crush
like-
the black militant movement and do woke politics at the same time.
Right.
The
You also literally get Obama.
yeah,
Like Obama
Yeah.
is like the shadow member of the ticket.
right.
Yeah.
Also, you have really the black and POC developing upper middle class can actually stake the terms of BLM and crush its own militancy and save itself, which is something that is not addressed enough. And they are able to do that under a Democratic ticket more easily. They were able to do it under Obama, not during Occupy, but during the first round of BLM itself. Like, moving BLM into the colleges is, is a great thing for them. And you start seeing people talk, not against like police abolition, or police abolition becomes really abstract. They start talking about diversifying the FBI. That is what happened in BLM 1. I use that because I saw it. Like I saw it happen.
You're not wrong.
And so like that tactic, I think the other thing is though, I think we're still thinking in terms of like the next 6 months. When I think in the terms of this, I think we're going to watch Biden screw up after like wins or loses. I'm also personally not want to put money down on either side right now, even though like it does tell me that the conditions match up with the few times that an incumbent have lost historically in America. But I also think if you look at the other times this has happened, Biden will not have a long presidency. And I think the idea that, Biden's idea, I think, is even to like, I'm going to step down and we're going to rush Kamala Harris in, and it's going to be easy as an extension of the presidency. And that probably will fail. And so we're still in, even though this has become a right-wing metaphor, we're still in the Bonapartist clown world's repercussions. Like, and the last time this happened, it lasted from 1968 until 1980, and the restorer of the new order was a shift in the right from the Rockefeller Republicans to the Schlafly Reagan Republicans, and so like many things, like Occupy was the end of like a kind of anarchism, for example. This is the end of something else. I think this is the end of that. What comes next, we got no idea, and so I think we don't know either way. If Trump wins, I have no idea what the Democrats roll out next. I have no idea what Republicans roll out next. There's no national figure that's a clear analog to Trump. There isn't one.
The Republicans are expecting that if Trump loses, you're going to see doubling down on right-wing politics, and someone even more repugnant's going to be in the charge of that party. Who knows if they'll actually have any political support.
The only person that could recapture the magic is Kanye. Like that's the only person. I'm serious. That's the only person that comes to mind that could pull off the right amount of like Twitter celebrity and like sort of left field like
Kanye 2024. Let's do this.
Reactionary kind of vibe.
Seriously, he could do it. Like, people laugh at Trump.
Exactly.
Like Kanye, he may have manic depression or something like, but he could fucking do it.
Yeah.
The
last thought. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Cross talk.
No,
and then
last thought. Then let's
right,
actually get back to the text.
Yeah, because I just wanted to say the last thing about this is that as the really funny thing about the bourgeoisie, after having sacrificed its general class interests, which is to say its political interests, to its most sordid private interests and most narrow interests, now demands that the proletariat fight and die for them. And that they've been tragically misunderstood and misled by the socialists away from defending the bourgeois general class interest. And it's just such a funny, I don't know, like there's, again, Marx is back with the wit in the pen here. And that's just a very funny line. Of course, in the next line, he talks about German shysters and riffraff, but it's...
What do people think about that? Like, for like how the socialists in America are now going like, fuck Biden, I'm not voting for him. It's kind of like a similar kind of dynamic, isn't it? You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're going to go, you can't win. You, like, by not voting or voting for, it's all the fucking same.
Right.
It's a tragic. We're being the proletariat being tragically misled by the socialists into not voting blue no matter who.
Yeah, they
Sad.
say shit like that. Sad. They say shit like that all the time.
But you know what's? I don't know. The thing is that they don't vote already. Like,
No, that's
This is nothing new.
That's
They don't
for
need
sure.
a socialist to tell them to not vote. Like,
It's
the socialists desperately want them to vote.
yeah, actually.
That's true. Oh dear, the socialists are the ones fucking voting for the Democrats. That's the sickness of the whole fucking thing.
well, yeah, like those are the people that are being browbeaten right now, right? Blue, like, with the blue no matter who line is folks like us, you know.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Don't give it to them.
And I'm in the UK. How am I supposed to vote for him? I don't get it. Now, like, I think that browbeating is not working to the same extent from what I can see from over here.
no, I don't think it is either. But I
I
also
mean,
don't think it
they
matters.
obviously, like, the party itself obviously doesn't give a shit.
It doesn't give a shit.
It's just
such a
It does.
No, they don't. They don't care about the socialists. They really don't. It's like, you look at what their strategy is, and it has absolutely nothing to do with getting Bernie's vote.
Right.
It's just not their strategy.
The Bernie Krats are totally soul broken in a way that even in 2016 there was still like a spark of like, you screwed us, we're angry, we're mad at you, we'll be back. This time it's brutal. That's why we put in that Jacobin magazine ad in the cognitive dissonance Bernie defeat like issue, is because like there's a dead end there. I feel like that's why you see a lot of the Bernie Krats that like they either have like a really deep break, a sort of Virgil Texas sojourn through Twitch and that sort of stuff, or they're going hard anti-Ide Paul, like, you ruined this for us.
Right.
Like,
You see,
I'm still stuck in 2016. I'm going to double down on Logic Bro, and it's all the trannies' fault now. Like,
and
stuff.
even like like the amount of people I hear from that sphere talking about red brown alliances seriously, and defending Trump as, like, you know, at least he's not starting new wars.
Social fascism, but actually,
yeah, like, I mean, you know, the funny thing that you want to talk about left right pincer moves that don't work, that has failed every single time. Like,
and
anyway.
Well, one thing, like, I'd like to say as well is, like, you know, when we did all the revolutionary strategy and you know, I was certainly thinking through the stuff about, like, you know, taking over the Labour Party or taking over this. It, like, those things don't ever fucking work, you know, unless it's until we build our own institutions. All of this other stuff all this bourgeois politics stuff is just bullshit.
Don't let people represent you, man. Like, that's
welcome to the dark side.
Yeah,
Tom.
I was always there, but I was kind of trying to, like, fucking think it through as well, you know, and give it the experience. But it's like,
there was something happening. Like, I corresponded with a member of EndNotes, who I won't, like, name, who was telling me that the struggle within the Labour Party was the struggle of a generation. And I didn't know how to respond. I'll get back to them eventually. But I was just sort of frozen. Like, what the fuck's happening here? Like that's
What do they mean by that? When you say the struggle of generation, they actually meant it was a big fucking thing that's going on in it.
Yeah, and I feel like it was sort of a hallucination in the desert, seeing an oasis, because you live in Brighton or in Oakland or Brooklyn, or in a sort of, like, you know, lefty sort of kombucha stronghold or something, like, and you see that there is, like, some kind of, you know, popular. You see that there's some kind of, like, hipster popular movement or something. All right, like, you see that there's any motion at all inside a mainstream party in a way that we've never seen. Like, I mean, we haven't seen anything this big in, I don't know, in my lifetime. Like, and you know, you can really get swept up in the momentum, because some form of localism, if you're in one of those areas, at just the standard kind of anarchist localism and working with what's there, you know, there were campaigns in those places, right? And so I could see how somebody in that situation could get swept up. But it was just one of those sort of like brain blowing a gasket kind of things where especially when I was more of a Leninist, I would always smirk and be like, these autonomists, they're just social democrats in waiting. They're just two sides of the same pole. And I mean, there's like two sides of the same coin. And there's a way in which that's correct, but like that actually still doesn't give you like an answer, right? Like
feels bad.
Feels bad.
Yeah.
Feels bad. Like,
man, all the Leninists in England, I would think most of them went in for Corbyn as well. Let's be honest. It wasn't just communist or communizers.
No, of course.
The whole left.
That's something that might be a little different between the United States and the UK is that like the Leninists will go for Bernie, and there is like a section of like Biden Leninists or something, but like really the whole like Leninist political identity here is an attempted response to the failure of Bernie, like,
right.
and you know, people realizing that that's not going to work and trying to form some united Red Army cult in order to flee from the reality.
Well,
that there's no institutional option.
It also has the fact that Chinese government actors have Twitter. I'm not kidding. So,
I know you're not kidding, but that doesn't account for like the MLs that are like, that's not real socialism. You betrayed socialism in 1980.
Yeah,
there's
but there's not many
universal health care there.
But there's not many of them left. If you look at the largest like anti-revisionist parties, they're mostly Xiist adjacent now.
I mean, feel like it's changed in the last couple of years. I used to see so many of the anti-revisionists hated Xi, and now they all have gone in for fucking. There's like a few holdouts, and that's it. Like you're a settler if you hate on Xi.
Yeah, you're basically a tribe. Like,
not seriously. It's like
a settler for hating on Xi.
It's like we wouldn't be settlers if we liked Xi. Yeah.
It's like literally prosecuting a campaign of settler colonial genocide right now.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, you're just a settler. You don't understand.
Yeah,
they're helping them.
If you don't support the Chinese struggle against Uyghur terrorism, you are a settler. Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, how much I've gotten yelled at. You know what? But let's be honest about this for a second. These are all bourgeois adjacent politics. Yeah. All of it. Yeah. Even the
true.
Weirdo Maoist cult stuff.
It's all the same.
It's actually about picking sides in bourgeois political battles, of which we have no goddamn interest.
Yeah, we have no stake.
Do you know the people who are actually colonized have zero stake in what Xi is doing, actually. Like, maybe Cuba because they help out some of the Native American. I mean, but like
they have a stake in deposing Xi so they can break up the concentration camps that they're in, maybe.
Right.
Other than that.
But I mean, like when you deal with that here, like Cuba's relationship with like Xi's China is actually not as clear. They're kind of on their own in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Cuba's on their own.
Right. Yeah. So like when you look at all this right now, I mean, I don't want to make this like a referendum on people's stances on China, because I also think there's a lot of reactionary hatred of China that's like that's
China.
Like,
and a lot of bad propaganda on China too that people
it's so bad. I mean, honestly, it's one of the reasons why I think some of this like pro-Chinese stuff has an appeal is because some of the propaganda's gotten so lazy. Like it's just like come on, man, they're it's not that bad over there. But the stuff with what you get thrown at is like, you know, say, I don't know what it seems to me that when we look at the left right now is in response to the delusions of the bourgeoisie, we have retreated into our own delusions.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll tell you what it is, Derek. It's like you're drunk. It's the end of the night in the nightclub. You're messy as fuck, and you're trying your best to score with anything that has got any movement at all. That's what's going on. You're on the floor. You're the last one left, and you're just like trying to chat up a pillar or a fucking doorman, like whatever the fuck. That's what's going on right now. That's what the left is doing in all these different Western countries.
I think sadly, Tom, you
That's
are absolutely
pretty accurate.
correct.
Yeah,
Pretty accurate.
Yeah, I was like, this is gonna go bad places. But you know what? Yeah, that was
That's pretty-
100% on point.
Pretty accurate. We should probably get back to the text. I'm sorry to bring settler colonialism and G into it because, you know.
No, but
Sorry
it's,
for interrupting you, Derek. Sorry for interrupting you, but I
No,
just
that's great. That's true.
no, it's good.
Very
No,
good.
I think if there's one thing I could say about this is that comment about the labor struggle, the Corbyn struggle being a struggle of a generation, I think kind of makes sense in a way, because I think our generation is just going to be like, on the left is going to be brain broken for a good while after the Bernie Corbyn moment has collapsed. Like,
Yeah,
doing
stuff.
just bizarre shit because we can't process it. It was like, okay, Occupy failed, let's become social democrats, that's gonna work. That failed, question mark.
Yeah.
And then we end up exactly where Tom described.
Yeah, I think that like the communizer that you quoted there, Esri, was right for the wrong reason, because I think it probably was the UK's generation's like battle for maybe the next 10, 15, 20 years. Like, that's the sadness of it, but I think that's probably true.
It's the kind of thing that it's the kind of thing that they would, but it was the kind of thing that, like, as late as Endnotes 3, they would be mocking. You know what I mean? Like, they were they're mocking the working class that only has their hands in their heart, and that sort of like labor kind of ideology, like of class that would tie itself into the party. Like, it was a big part of the appeal of communization is its mutual derision of social democracy and Leninism. And it was just, I don't know. I found it revealing and troubling. And it's a correspondence I really need to get back up on, because I hope he's doing all right.
Now picture to yourself the French bourgeois.
Yeah.
How in the throes of business panic, his trade crazy brain is tortured. Set in a whirl, stunned by rumors of coup d'etat and the restoration of universal suffrage, by the struggle between parliament and the executive power, by the front war between the Orleanists and the Legitimists, by the communist conspiracies in the south of France, by the alleged jacqueries in the department of the Nerve and Cher, by the Nieve and Char, by the advertisements of the different candidates for presidency, by the cheap jack solutions offered by journals, by the threat of the Republicans to uphold the Constitution and universal suffrage by force of arms, by the gospel preaching of emigre heroes in the Partibus, who announced that the world would come to an end on the second Sunday in May 1852. Think of all this, and you will comprehend why, in this unspeakable, deafening chaos of fusion, revision, prorogation, constitution, conspiration, coalition, immigration, usurpation, and revolution, the bourgeois madly snorts at his parliamentary republic, rather an end with terror than a terror without end, which this feels very, very apt to everything we're talking about, except now we're all trade crazed.
Yeah, well, like, to locate it in the text a little bit, there's a huge paragraph, which we're not going to read, that goes through essentially a textiles crisis, where there's a crisis of, like, there's crop failures and rise and falls in the price of cotton. There's like a crop failure in silk or it's below average yield. And then, like, in wool manufacturing, the price of wool goes up quicker than the actual, like, wool products made from the raw materials can countenance. And so there's a whole, like, economic crisis in textiles. It's also happening in England, although it's more of a manufacturing thing in France and a bit more, like, commercially located in England. But all the while, the bourgeoisie is blaming the political situation in the parliament for the crisis. And doesn't matter that right when the political crisis gets the worst, the economy recovers. Like that's not like factoring into the analysis at all.
Yeah,
You
like
know-
Marx makes a case that is like it's like the politics was blamed on the economics, which wasn't true. And but even when the economics came back up, there was also still this political crisis. And the political crisis was deeper than just a normal standard trade crisis. It was, it was a class battle that had to be, that capitalism was birthing in France.
Well, the economics was blamed on the politics, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But underlying it was a deeper political, social battle that was going on that was kind of separate from the actual economic crisis that was being blamed, the politics was being blamed for.
Well, I think actually the blame went both ways. Like the politics was blamed on the economic crisis, and the economic crisis was blamed on the political crisis, which we both see now. I also think when people think that Marx is a one-to-one political determinist or economic determinist, when you reach it like this, you have to just go like, no, he's got a way more complicated picture of their interaction. Like they're feeding each other in these complicated feedback loops, but they're not one-to-one the same thing.
Right. You had the commercial panic in England, but you didn't get this meltdown.
Right. But the meltdown does have to do with the larger structure of the economy, in that sense that classes are driving the meltdown, but not necessarily the immediate income ratios, which always, to me, like I'm gonna be honest, to me, like people who read, and I know there's reasons to read Capital this way, but people who read Marxist as an immediate immiserationist and then read this, how do you justify that? Like, because you can't read this and go like, oh, Marx thinks that politics is solely driven by immiseration in the political economy in a way that would lead to one-to-one revolution, like, because he's obviously seeing that's not true in France. So how do you process that? Like, to me, that's a real question. Like, because I actually don't know what Marx actually is on that term. Like, I've read a lot of Marx.
I guess based on like what we were reading here and kind of like based on what you were talking about just now, the thing that comes to mind is that maybe, dare I say, maybe use an analytic model, like at least in this particular instance, it seems like there's a mediating factor between the economic situation and the political situation, the economic crisis and the political crisis, which would be the class struggle, right? The kind of like growing pains of like the capitalist class displacing the landed aristocracy. Meanwhile, they're building out the proletariat, which is the new lower class, kind of creating this tension within both the economic sphere and the political sphere. That's why it's not one-to-one, is that the way that the class conflict is impacting the politics and impacting the economics is different. And it's also different within nations.
So I want to just complicate this a little bit, though. What Marx is describing here is class struggle within the class itself. So this is not like the proletariat versus the bourgeois.
Yeah,
this
fair.
is the bourgeois versus the bourgeois versus the ancien regime.
The landed aristocracy is becoming is like
It's morphing into a form of bourgeois, but it's still kind of holding on to a lot of that old way. And another complicating factor is that, like, early in the chapter, Marx talks about how, like, if the party of order with the legitimists and the Orleanists want to, like, be able to govern together, they already have the best form to do that in a parliament.
Right.
You can't do that with a familial monarchy. It's just not going to work. So they have to let go of that political form. If they want to survive, they have to let go of that political form and stick with their parliament and hash it out in parliament instead of trying to have a monarchy, because you got to pick a family. You can't have both.
Yeah, in a way, like if they stuck with the bourgeois form,
Right.
it would have been the best for the mutually competing factions of the monarchists.
Right,
Like-
because the state is a classed organ.
Yeah.
If you really, the lesson here is, if you really love a monarch, you just got to let them go.
Oh, I guess it worked for Canada.
It did. It really did.
Yeah.
That's Kyle speaking from his lived experience.
Like we just, like, what are you talking about? Like when Harry and Angela. No. That's what do you mean? We still have a monarch. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm actually being a dick. No,
you know that I'm actually a direct descendant of the High Kings of Ireland. I'm actually the royalty here.
Holy shit.
The last king. I'm not a direct.
That's fake.
Everybody who's got the name O'Brien means son of Brian, which originates apparently from Brian Boru, who was the last king of Ireland, who was killed after the Battle of Clontarf when they bet the shit out of the Vikings. Apparently, they said he was on his knees in his tent praying afterwards. But apparently, the proper history is that he was shagging the whole load of like women of ill repute, and some fella came in and slit his throat. So there you go. Only one royalty here, motherfucker.
That's better. That's better than praying, honestly.
What a way to go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We go on to the next bit.
Yeah, let's go on.
Yeah, let's go on to the next bit.
I mean, yeah.
I'm stunned to silence. Like,
Yeah. That's the only thing that's going to get us to shut up. Like, really.
Was there a line of thought?
No, I
let's
actually,
keep going.
I was actually thinking about, though, in all seriousness, in this weird way in which America like loves British royalty in a way that's really profoundly unhealthy because we got rid of them.
Yeah, our entire national identity is about how cool and strong we are, that we fought the slaving tyranny of the British, even though I guess we kind of really love slaving tyranny.
It's like going back to an abusive parent. Anyway.
Yeah. After
Okay.
being abusive parents.
I'm gonna read this bit. Okay, let's mute you there. Okay, okay. So there's basically a bit of talk here beforehand where Marx talks about all the rumors of coups and how they started like the minute Bonaparte got elected, and we end up here with this bit. The coup d'état was ever the fixed idea of Bonaparte. With this idea, he again set foot on French soil. He was so obsessed by it that he continually betrayed it and blurted it out. He was so weak that just as continually he gave it up again. The shadow of the coup d'état had become so familiar to the Parisians as a spectre that they were not willing to believe in it when it finally appeared in the flesh. What allowed the coup d'état to succeed was therefore neither the reticent reserve of the chief of the Society of December 10th, nor the fact that the National Assembly was caught unawares. If it succeeded, it succeeded despite its indiscretion and with its foreknowledge, a necessary, inevitable result of antecedent developments. On October the 10th, Bonaparte announced to his ministers his decision to restore universal suffrage. On the 16th, they handed in their resignations. On the 26th, Paris learned of the formation of the Thorigny Ministry. Police Prefect Carlier was simultaneously replaced by Maupin. The head of the 1st Military Division, Magnan, was concentrated the most reliable regiments in the capital. On November 4th, the National Assembly resumed its sessions. It had nothing better to do than to recapitulate in a short, succinct form the course it had gone through and to prove that it was buried only after it had died. The first post it forfeited in the struggle with the executive power was the ministry. It had solemnly to admit this loss by accepting at full value the Thorigny Ministry, a mere shadow cabinet. The Permanent Commission had received Monsieur Giraud with laughter when he presented himself in the name of the new ministers. Such a weak ministry for such strong measures as the restoration of universal suffrage. Yet the precise object was to get nothing through in Parliament, but everything against Parliament. Like, it's very difficult for me reading this stuff not to think of what went on with Brexit, about how they played like these repeated votes in Parliament, and they basically got Parliament to vote down against it, vote down against it, and turned basically the electorate against Parliament and wanted somebody just to come in and rescue the situation. Fuck it, doesn't matter what it is, you just do it. Okay, I've got. I think I'll keep going unless somebody wants to stop there.
That's been an American political strategy for like 50 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, the whole idea of like
We-
fucking Congress, you fucking assholes don't do shit. Like just a blind rage at the legislative body.
Yeah, like, oh, there's all this procedure and it's always stopped up. We need solutions. We don't want any of the solutions on offer, of course, and we will spend, people will spend lots of money to obstruct anything if anything tries to get done. But, goddamn Congress, if only, and there is definitely the kind of, gosh, if only we had, a strong man that can push things through.
Yeah,
And,
the sort of like, every so often the New York Times editorial board just gets a huge enthusiasm for the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
The Bloomberg liberal.
Yeah,
But I mean, but like that's actually like that's U.S. politics on both sides. Is like we hate Congress. Congress is designed not to function. Actually, as a side note, it is designed not to function. Particularly after reforms in the conservative and progressive reforms in the middle 20th century actually really made Congress a lot less functional. And so you always you have more democracy because democracy is going to lead to dysfunction, and then we're going to have everyone focus on a national election, and then we can just force stuff through the executive, and it works. This has been kind of a bourgeois apparatus thing for a long time.
Yeah. Esri, do you want to take the next bit?
Sure. All right. So it's Quaestors. Is that how you pronounce that? Quaestors?
Yeah, Quaestors.
Quaestors.
Was the Quaestor not in what's that fucking shit TV series with the dragons? The big one there was recently.
Oh, fucking
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. I don't think so.
No, Quaestor in Game of Thrones. Okay.
I've only watched one episode of Game of Thrones. It was the last episode of Game of Thrones. I watched it at Jamie Peck's house, and it was the only one I saw. And I think I was the only person to ever enjoy the last episode of Game of Thrones. So I had no stake in it, and I was like, "All right, look, it's Brendan the Broken. That's kind of ableist. Well, good for him." Anyway.
I think it was Maesters, Tom, not
Quaestors. I actually know how to pronounce Quaestors from role playing as a kid.
Quaestors. Okay, so it's Quaestors. Quaestors.
Yeah.
Quaestors. So, I'm sorry.
Quay.
Got it. I'm gonna be a perfect frog, and when I count to 10, be the perfect frog. Okay. On the very first day of its reopening, the National Assembly received the message from Bonaparte, in which he demanded the restoration of universal suffrage and the abolition of the law of May 31st, 1850. The same day, his ministers introduced a decree to this effect. The National Assembly at once rejected the ministry's motion of urgency and rejected the law itself on November 13th by 355 votes to 348. Thus, it tore up its mandate once more. It once more confirmed the fact that it had transformed itself from the freely elected representatives of the people to the usurpatory parliament of a class. It acknowledged once more that it had itself cut in two the muscles which connected the parliamentary head with the body of the nation. By its motion to restore universal suffrage, the executive power appealed from the National Assembly to the people. The legislative power appealed by its Quaestors bill from the people to the army. This Quaestors bill was to establish its right of directly requisitioning troops, of forming a parliamentary army. While it thus designated the army as the arbiter between itself and the people, between itself and Bonaparte, while it recognized the army as the decisive state power, it had to confirm, on the other hand, the fact that it had long given up its claim to dominate this power. By debating its right to requisition troops, instead of requisitioning them at once, it betrayed its doubts about its own powers. By rejecting the Quaestors bill, it made public confession of its impotence. The bill was defeated, its proponents lacking 108 votes of a majority. The Montaigne thus decided the issue. It found itself in the position of Buridan's ass, not indeed between two bundles of hay with the problem of deciding which was the more attractive, but between two showers of blows, with the problem of deciding which was the harder. On the one hand, there was the fear of Changarnier. On the other, the fear of Bonaparte. It must be confessed that the position was not a heroic one. On November 18th, an amendment was moved to the law on municipal elections introduced by the Party of Order to the effect that instead of 3 years, 1 year's domicile should suffice for municipal electors. The amendment was lost by a single vote, but this vote immediately proved to be a mistake. By splitting up into its hostile factions, the Party of Order had long ago forfeited its independent parliamentary majority. It showed now that there was no longer any majority at all in Parliament. The National Assembly had become incapable of transacting business. Its atomic constituents were no longer held together by any force of cohesion. It had drawn its last breath. It was dead. End scene.
I should play some organ music here.
Yeah.
This would be good. Place for it,
Yeah. R.I.P.
R.I.P. P.O.O. That's what I say.
Yeah. So yeah.
They were doomed, really. The initials of Party of Order is poo. Really, like, think about it. They were never going to do anything.
Is it that way in French?
Le poo.
Yeah. All right.
No, it would be party would be at the end, wouldn't it be? It would be like oops.
That's why I was way more confident.
Whichever way you look at it.
You can't have party at the front in French. In Canada, we have the Parti Québécois, the Québécois party in Quebec, as you might imagine.
So it would have been poo.
It would have been poo, yeah, because in the SAF was the French Communist Party, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You like Parti d'Ordre or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is pathetic, right?
Let's get to the actual text.
They voted on the bill to try to do something that I guess they already had the power to do.
It wasn't clear if that was something they could just do, or if what Marx meant is that since Bonaparte is playing dirty and extra constitutionally, like, just fucking get the troops to defend yourself. Fuck it. Like, at this point, like,
I don't even think he was acting extra constitutionally when he did any of these moves. He was able to get rid of the ministers. The thing is that they'd already assigned over the power. Do you remember there was a part where Changarnier was supposed to be reporting to them or something, and he basically filled the army with loyalists, and they wouldn't, so that they'd already kind of lost control over the army, particularly when they went against the army over them going in attacking Rome, the Roman Republic. So they've already lost the army. So this vote was them trying to regain the army on some level, but they couldn't even really do it. That's
not quite right, Tom. The vote was to raise a separate army under the control of Parliament, which would not be under the control of Changarnier. This was brought up a little bit earlier in the text. This question of the parliamentary army, but yeah, they basically didn't have the confidence. They didn't have the guts to try to raise a separate army to take on Changarnier's army.
So they already lost control of the army. Then they're like, "Hey, let's make our own army." And then they couldn't. They're like, "Let's vote about raising like a parliamentary, extra, I don't like what's the word? Extra, I forget the word.
Paramilitary.
Let's have an official paramilitary and let's vote on having a paramilitary."
Basically. The funny thing is, they did, and it was called the National Guard, right? It was gone. So
right.
But in Kyle, were they not trying to requisition, like, take a part of the army and make it answerable to the Parliament, or it was going to be
I think they were trying to raise an entirely separate force. Yeah,
that was a dumb idea.
It was an act of desperation, right? Like, they had this idea on the books as like a kind of insurance policy for their power, right? And then when the moment came to actually call it in, they realized how unfeasible it was. And yeah, didn't amount to anything.
So
It's fucking pathetic any way you slice it.
So this is sort of how like Trump uses DHS to do the work that he can't get the army to do, and DHS is like not actually all that. Yeah, other than Border Patrol being a bunch of paramilitary goons that we've allowed to be paramilitary goons for 50 years, it can't really do that much because like they don't actually have that much power, even under broad constitutional powers going back to Bush. Is that what it's like? Because it's like this is where the analogy to the current really falls down. Because for one thing,
Yeah, that
American politicos have not really paid attention to the army and politicized it since I don't know Eisenhower. Like
during like Vietnam, there was some politicization.
yeah, but
Like-
even then, like you had it like
Vietnam War.
McNamara like did the Pentagon Papers to mess with LBJ, like so they didn't even really control it that thoroughly then. Like
I think you might see this as similar to what happened in the English Civil War.
okay,
Where Parliament had its own army, right? But of course, this is a more modern situation where you have standing armies and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think if you look at like I guess it's definitely like the situation with DHS is kind of like in between this idea and like the society of what was it the society of
December 10th.
December 10th,
Yeah,
right? That's kind of what DHS feels like to me. Is like. Yeah, it's like it's kind of part of the state. It's kind of a conspiracy. It's kind of a personalistic power thing. But I don't think
that's where DHS came up before. Like that's what I was thinking about. Is that when we talked about DHS before, it was actually on the Bonapartist side, and here this.
Yeah, it's definitely not like Congress is running DHS against the Pentagon or something like that. Yeah,
right.
yeah, that'd be madness, man. When I think about that, it is like Congress called up an additional militia, so because it didn't trust the Pentagon staffing the generals correctly, because it liked the president too much. Like that is the American, and we don't. That didn't even happen in the Civil War, so like we don't have anything like this is truly sad and pathetic. Please help us, military we can't raise in time. I mean, like, what would they done if they got it? Even like
They wouldn't have done anything.
They would have voted on whether to have a coup. Like that's what they would have done. It's like full parliamentary cretinism.
Yeah,
and of course, the people doing this are royalists.
That's the funny thing. It's so fucking backwards.
Yeah, like 100 years after their idol was decapitated to prevent this kind of like governmental form from taking hold. It's like, help me, Parliament, you're my only hope. It's really a pathetic farce. Like, and Marx really, you can tell Marx really enjoys how humiliated they are, while being terrified and kind of like at the same time. Like, this is actually kind of scary, but it's kind of funny too.
I mean, it is
a bit of an edge lord.
It is interesting to me. This is the text that if you want to understand where Marxists fail to understand fascism, is because they don't see this text enough, because fascists always tend to start off this kind of farcical and then end up like killing a whole shit ton of people.
Yeah, people think, oh, they're just idiots. Look, they don't make any sense. They're stupid, and the next thing they know, they've got their hands on the fucking weapons. And it doesn't matter if they have stupid ideology.
They don't win ultimately, but they can kill a whole lot of people in failing, and that's like
right.
That's bad enough.
Yeah, like, and in fairness to Bonaparte, he didn't really fail. And he didn't really. Did he kill that many people in the grand scheme of things?
No, I think
he just lost France a catastrophic war with Germany or Prussia at the time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yep, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's true.
Other than that.
Other than that,
Yeah. Ah, shit. There's my. See, you can listen to all those fucking Revolutions podcasts, but they go in one ear and out the other. You know.
That's why we got the chopping block, Tom. You're gonna make me and you sound as smart as possible. No one will be any the wiser.
I'm telling you, a lot of chopping to do today with our poo and oops. Okay. Okay. Kyle, do you want to round it out? And just
All
do
right,
the
sounds
last bit?
good.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, where am I reading up to?
Just
the last bit?
state consulta.
Consults. Okay. All right, so we start with a block quote from the Journal des Débats. With such unhoped for successes.
Sorry, yeah, just before, this quote is actually a quote of Bonaparte that he's given to people on the return from the London Industrial Exhibition to a whole load of a crowd of bourgeoisie.
Right, so he says, with such unhoped for successes, I am justified in reiterating how great the French Republic would be if it were permitted to pursue its real interests and reform its institutions, instead of being constantly disturbed by demagogues on the one hand and by monarchist hallucinations on the other. Loud, stormy, and repeated applause from every part of the amphitheater. The monarchist hallucinations hinder all progress and all important branches of industry. In place of progress, nothing but struggle. One sees men who were formerly the most zealous supporters of the royal authority and prerogative become partisans of a convention merely in order to weaken the authority that has sprung from universal suffrage. Loud and repeated applause. We see men who have suffered most from the revolution and have deplored it most provoke a new one, and merely in order to fetter the nation's will. I promise you tranquility for the future, etc., etc. Bravo, bravo! A storm of bravos. So this is Bonaparte with his adoring audience.
So this is how democracy dies.
So what's funny about this is we always try to make Bonaparte like Trump as a Bonapartist, but like in some ways that I feel like that could come out of Joe Biden's mouth like verbatim.
Oh yeah. Kyle
called that early.
18th Brumaire, baby.
Joe Biden.
18th Brumaire of Joe Biden. Anyway,
God, we thought it was funny at the time. We thought it was funny
until history is on horseback.
Yeah, right. History on horseback. Oh my God. Okay. So thus the industrial bourgeoisie applauds with servile bravos the coup d'etat of December 2nd, the annihilation of Parliament, the downfall of its own rule, the dictatorship of Bonaparte. The thunder of applause on November 25th had its answer in the thunder of cannon on December 4th. And it was on the house of Monsieur Salandros, who had clapped most, that they clapped most of the bombs. Cromwell, when he dissolved the Long Parliament, went alone into its midst, took out his watch so that it should not continue to exist a minute after the time limit he had fixed, and drove each one of the members of Parliament with hilariously humorous taunts. Napoleon, smaller than his prototype, at least he betook himself on the 18th Brumaire to the legislative body and read out to it, though in a faltering voice, its sentence of death. The second Bonaparte, who, moreover, found himself in possession of an executive power very different from that of Cromwell or Napoleon, sought his model not in the annals of world history, but in the annals of the Society of December the 10th, in the annals of the criminal courts. He robs the Bank of France of 25 million francs, buys General Magnon with 1 million, the soldiers with 15 francs apiece and liquor, comes together with his accomplices secretly like a thief in the night, has the houses of the most dangerous parliamentary leaders broken into, and Cavaignac, La Mauricière, Le Flot, Changarnier, Charras, Trier, Baz, etc., dragged from their beds and put in prison. The chief squares of Paris and the parliamentary building occupied by troops and cheap jack placards posted early in the morning on all the walls, proclaiming the dissolution of the National Assembly and the Council of State, the restoration of universal suffrage, and the placing of the Seine Department in a state of siege. In like manner, he inserted a little later in the Moniteur a false document which asserted that influential parliamentarians had grouped themselves around him and formed a state consulta.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the end of the chapter. I don't know if I want to read. Maybe just read the next little paragraph. Okay.
The Rump Parliament assembled in the Mairie building of the 10th arrondissement and consisting mainly of the Legitimists and Orleanists, votes the deposition of Bonaparte amid repeated cries of "Long live the Republic!" unfailingly harangues the gaping crowds before the building, and is finally led off in the custody of African sharpshooters, first to the Dulce barracks and later packed into prison vans and transported to the prisons of Mazas, and Vincennes. Thus ended the Party of Order, the Legislative Assembly, and the February Revolution.
Wow.
Whenever I feel bad about American history, I can always look to France.
Yeah.
And then there's a nice handy timeline of its Requiem for a Dream style degeneration that we probably all could have consulted beforehand. Just because we don't remember all of our Mike Duncan offhand. So
yeah, he's got a very excellent outline of the stages of degeneration. I love how in the first period, from February 24th to May 4th, 1848, February period, prologue, Universal Brotherhood swindle.
Yeah.
God, it's so I forget that Marx is funny.
Yeah, and then the last bit here, victory of Bonaparte, parody of restoration of empire.
Yeah. When you spend a lot of time with like totally humorless Marxists, you do forget that Marx had a sense of humor, is a funny person, is entertaining to read. Also, if you spend all your time looking at his unedited like political economy notes or posthumous stuff, it's like,
I was about to say the Grandessa is not funny.
No, it's not. Theories of surplus value is not very. I mean, I guess there's a couple dunks.
There's some zingers in Capital Volume 1 and 2, but in general, you got about 500 pages between them, and most of them are in footnotes. So,
Capital
there's
Volume 1.
some good stuff in Volume 3 when he gets to talking about like the finance sector.
Oh God, that is funny.
Yeah.
I actually wish Marx had lived long enough to write more about the finance sector because it's become so important, but also it's like when he says some hilarious shit in that part of the book.
Anybody know who this Monsieur Salandruz was, who clapped the most, that they clapped most of the bombs on him? Like, I looked him up. I think he was like some bourgeoisie. So I wonder why they fucked the bombs on him. Maybe, that's just kind of an aside.
He appears to be an industrialist of some sort.
Yeah. So in Cromwell, like Marx makes out he was like a smart bastard.
I do want to just sort of mention in this history, the greatest booster of the Nazis in Austria. As soon as the Nazis showed up, they were like, "Oh, you're too much of an academic for us," and killed him the first day of the Anschluss.
What? Who are you saying?
He was an intellectual who turned towards supporting and boosting Nazism and Führerprinzip, and argued for Anschluss. And as soon as the SS rolled into Austria, they did him in. just right away. It was like, nah, I don't think you're going to fit in here, buddy. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Rip.
That's
Thunder of bombs fell upon his head.
So
yeah, the bombs clapped on who had clapped best. All right, makes
Okay.
sense.
do we have anything to say about this last little bit, or are we? It kind of
Is
says
the custody of African sharpshooters his part of the lumpen composition of the Society of December 10th?
no.
Yeah,
I
what
think
was that about?
No, they're a division. They're the army. They'll be a section of the. They're probably like Algerian troops or something.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's nothing much to say about this bit. It's just basically like this is the end of it. Do we have anything else we wanted to say about chapter 6 before we close up?
Party of Order is a bunch of cucks.
I okay, baby.
They're rhinos. They literally were rhinos, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're monarchists who are masquerading as Republicans.
And his
Yeah.
death cry for the monarchy is "Long live the Republic." Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
that's hard.
Along with the Republic, as the Republic puts them into prison vans.
Kyle, that's two classics you have. The 18th Brumaire of Joe Biden and rhinos. Republicans in name only.
It's funny
Like,
because I wasn't sure if you meant
Zeros.
Republicans or Royalists in name only because they could be both.
Oh my
Like-
god.
But,
oh wow. I mean, yeah, like I said, sometimes French history makes me feel better about American history.
So
why do you say that?
Well, why do you say that?
Because of this.
Like, yeah, I mean, you give
Because
the
our
Federalists
early
one thing.
bourgeoisie were still in the English yeoman tradition, and they were fools, but they were fools who were more competent, frankly.
They still had slavery and big time and committed genocide. So it's like,
Oh, yeah.
but that's all the bourgeoisie. That's
This is-
everybody.
This isn't a virtue contest. This is
No,
like
no, no, no.
I know there's a bit of that.
This is the
going on.
least ridiculous contest.
yeah.
Least
like,
bad.
This
I
is
don't
not.
know.
This is not who's better. I mean, like, would I rather be a slave in Haiti or a slave in the U.S. South? Like, that's an idiotic question. You don't want to be either. But like,
Right.
who actually like our degeneration in 1860 was an actual proper fucking tragedy that also led to liberation. Theirs leads to not much of anything at all. So, like, well, sorta. Actually, yeah.
It leads to, Saint-Simonianism and massive state finance investment and a lot of scandals and harebrained schemes, which terminate when the Prussians roll in.
Right. Which
Did you hear-
also tends to be like, now that's the province of America and Britain. So,
Did you hear Boris Johnson's latest one? Actually, it's a few months old. Talk about harebrained schemes. He wants to build a bridge from the UK to Ireland, which would be probably like 40 miles, and it goes over all the ordnance where they dumped all their bombs after World War II. So there's if you sail in the Irish Sea, there's these certain pits where you're told not to go near because literally they dropped I think a couple of million tons of explosives to the bottom of the sea out there after World War II. So he wants to build a bridge over that, and the experts are going we can't go near there for 10,000 years or something.
Tom, no big deal. Just dig them up and shoot them into the sun. No
Yeah.
problem.
I know, it's just yeah.
well,
That's no deal.
also, I like to just remind people who get a little bit oh, Europe is so wonderful. And I'm do you read European news, particularly from the X part of Europe that is now the dangly bits floating in the ocean?
The dangly bit floating in the ocean. Yeah. This is not Star Trek. This isn't the Klingon Empire we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, I've always thought
Oh, yeah.
that Europe was the
I
dangly
know.
bits off Asia, and now I'm just gonna like, well, it has its own dangly bits up
Yeah.
north, like just floating.
We're at worst,
Wow.
we're the hindquarters.
Fractals.
Hindquarters.
Near the hindquarter.
The rump. The rump.
Yes, dangly fractals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Like, we keep making these comparisons, and the one thing I'll say about American yeoman bourgeoisie, like making pacts with slavers and bullshit, is that like, they set up Articles of Confederation, didn't work. Then they hammer through a constitution. The Republic survives a civil war and is like still around. What will this country do? Because all things end when things come tumbling down. Like in France, I mean, the government falls all the time.
I was about to say, like, we're like the third empire, the fourth republic.
Yeah,
or fifth
whatever.
Republic, whatever.
They'll just get a new one. They can just put it back. They've done it before. They'll do it again. Like, it's fine. But what happens when there's a real 18th Brumaire in the United States?
Right.
When there's really like when the grand experiment actually, like, the actual institutions crumble. Like,
we always compare it to the Soviet Union, but the Soviet experiment was only like 2 generations long.
yeah,
Right.
that was like one guy, like who drank a lot of carrot juice. And
It's
lived
one
a
of those.
long
Yeah,
time.
it's one of those things I actually like to point out when people are always like, "Well, America is the youngest national culture," and I'm like, it's an artificial nation, but it's literally the oldest constitutional nation on earth.
Yeah. There's loads of European nations are fucking only about 20 years old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Like what happens when this state falls? Like, you don't just put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
No, there's no second American Republic. Like,
No, I mean, there might be,
Maybe.
but it'll be in like New Jersey.
What are you trying to say?
long live the Jersey Republic.
The first.
What are you
The
trying to
first
say?
Jersey Republic.
It'll be unlivable? Like, what are you saying? No, I mean, like,
I'm just saying, like, who's gonna want it? And I think it's gonna be the state of Springsteen would want to be the second American Republic, and like.
Oh
like
my
there's
god.
there's a balkanization process, and some of them might have some, like, hey, remember when we had a continent-wide block from sea to shining sea kitsch, basically?
Yeah.
Like, because it does seem like, I don't know, people have said this in the past, certainly the New Left said stuff like this. It does seem like we're reaching the ends of our ability to resolve problems constitutionally.
Right. Here's what happens. What if the Constitution fails, but the state doesn't? Which is, I think, actually more likely.
Yeah, that's kind of been the situation for a while. Like,
You get that like
overtly.
late Roman Empire vibe.
Right, exactly. And I like this
Yeah.
point when people are like, "Well, you're gonna be at civil war real soon." I'm like, dude, the Roman Empire fell for like, I don't know, 1,000 fucking years. So like,
You're counting Byzantium, like,
and rightly so. So like,
we're gonna split down the middle. Like, the western half is gonna go like pretty quick and fall to the Californian barbarians, and then the eastern half is gonna preserve its, like, well, I guess that what the dynamic would be flipped, right?
I would
Like,
actually say
the eastern half would fall, and the western half would be like Americana, like preservationists for 1,000 years,
Yeah,
right?
what's
You'd have
weird
American
about
Byzantium.
What's weird about that, though, is I would say that California is the only part of the United States that could actually survive, but I don't actually believe that anymore because of both water and fire problems. It is actually not a viable republic. It has too many natural resource issues. So it's like, what do you do? I mean,
It'd have to be like Israel, just ultra
Off to a bad
organized.
start. Off to a
I'm
bad start.
listening. Like,
Like it would have to be a very disciplined society to survive, because you're talking about like yearly fire wars and water rationing ad infinitum.
yeah. So like the
Yeah.
culture of the Bay in LA would just have to not exist. Like,
they'd have to
Yeah.
annihilate themselves in like a kombucha war or something.
Well, I mean, like California fash. I guess those are a thing, though.
So we're talking about the new Californian Republic from Fallout New Vegas. Is that what we're talking about?
Basically,
But like worse, but worse. Yeah.
Yeah, the new California Republic is at least nominally democratic.
No, but they're really like, I mean, they look good compared to the Legion, that are LARPing ancient Rome and talking about Hegelian dialectics in a good way, which we all know is a big red flag. Huge red flag, and, are literally instituting slavery. But the new California Republic are also a bunch of jackbooted thugs.
Yeah, of course. So. Basically, what we're saying is that the only good route is free, independent New Vegas.
I mean, they do use an Auguste Blanqui quote for that, like for that quest. So that's pretty good. Anyway, what
are we talking about? What the
fuck are you talking about, Jesse?
Yeah, I was more just worried. I actually am thinking that we're seeing that the United States has a hyper brittle constitution. I think we all kind of know it now.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than just the constitution. I think their empire at the moment is brittle and it's breaking down, and I think that'll be the thing. I think that will catalyze all of this stuff, like the social and the political.
But it's really like the endogenous factors that seem to be weakening more so than the imperial holdings, and like in order to like actually keep the internal structure together, that would be the reason to like withdraw, kind of like in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, our military is still holding on to its proxies pretty well. Like, that's not the problem, and it's also able to keep our dollar afloat, which is also not the problem. The problem is it is a lot like it is more like in some way where ancient Rome, where our own internal politics is actually what's making our imperial project fail, not even over expansion. Like,
I don't know, like how much it was internal politics in Rome that caused the thing. I think it was a lot more complex than that. But also, I would say that that if you look at the transactions, the percentage of purchases done by China and Russia in the US dollar has dropped really significantly over the last few years.
Yeah, but they've been threatening it for a long time.
Oh yeah, but it dropped it from about 90% of all transactions in foreign transactions in the dollar about 4 years ago to about 60% this year. So I think that's a function of the dollar.
But if you're a proper Marxist, Tom, and I often doubt that you are.
Whoa!
Hey, lowercase m people.
Because
keep it descriptive.
Because you flirt too much with currency shit.
Oh God Almighty!
I know.
You're going to go there again.
No.
Okay,
but actually, here's my point.
The transformation problem makes MMT true. Anyway, what?
That is true.
Sorry, Derek. Go for it.
Derek,
you're gonna make your friend mad, really mad. Anyway, make a point.
The bigger point is China's economy is dependent on using America to throw its overproduction. Like that is a major factor in how it can produce, even with the state it effectively overproduces even for a capitalist economy. And even if you don't think it's a capitalist commodity, it's really overproducing. And it has that problem, and it has the problem with India. So the reason why I keep on saying Rome is where you don't have a clear hegemony to like just replace the old one. We really don't. Like you don't have a clear, like it's actually not clear that China can actually do it under its current structure. And the UNESCO, and what I'm not saying that means the US will. It means that like there's vestigial problems everywhere. Like there's not a clear new.
I think it's crisis. You're going to have a long period of crisis and stagnation and crisis. That's what I look at.
Well, I mean, I think that's a given, but I also think like if you look at it in terms of, it depends on when we look at crisis. Do we look at it in terms of capitalist crisis or in terms of like social collapse? And what I keep on telling Marxists is like, the end of feudalism is, the end of feudalism and the beginning of capitalism is actually kind of world historically the odd man out. That's not what normally happens when you hit crisis like this. You normally do have slow endogenous collapse. Like that's what normally happens.
If we're using Rome as an bye Kyle. If we're using Rome as the example, like that led to the rise of feudalism because they couldn't people couldn't rely on the Roman Empire to keep them safe, so they looked towards their local aristocratic landowners.
Right.
So are you saying that the kind of accelerationist neo-reaction people might be kind of right as we see the slow decline of the American Empire with no clear hegemon to replace it? Is it just going to be we're looking to our local nation state warlords to protect us?
Well, yeah, the corporate patchwork CEOs or whatever.
Yeah,
You're gonna be looking at different things depending on different areas. I also think you'll see a lot stronger regional politics. I mean, in some ways, I hate to say the Duganist, but the Duganist hope about breaking up American hegemony is not just so they can replace it as a world empire, but so that you have these strong, regionally dominant, fairly conservative, reactionary regimes emerge to dominate local areas in a way that the liberal order as headed by America has prevented. And you'll see that in liberal order itself. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're seeing. Is you're seeing various attempts to deal with the fact that everybody thinks there's a crisis coming that's bigger than the one we currently have. There's the big one, which is ecological, which no one can do shit about. But there's all these other things that we're hitting the limits on. And where I'm at is I don't think it's going to look like, I actually don't think it looks like a civil war. I don't think it looks like a revolution even. I think it looks like without certain other factors happening, it looks like a long kind of slow decline. It's we won't know it until it's way over. And I think it probably, in the United States, probably started before the Soviet Union even fell.
But I could see easily a kind of a 1830 type revolution, as in it's a revolution that tries in 20 years time or something and is kind of brought down a different path than it's intended.
I could see
something like that happening.
But what I don't see is I talk to a lot of people who really believe in Grossman and Mandel and this final immiseration thesis from and they really want to believe it. They really, really want to believe that you raise the proletariat up through capital and the socialization, then watch it clash, and it automatically will lead to a communist revolution. I'm gonna say if that's what Marx believed, he was wrong, and I don't know that's what Marx believed either.
Marx very clearly didn't believe that. In my view, in all of his political speeches and strategic writings and letters, he really saw the opportunity for revolutions and wars, which is right. When he was looking forward essentially to a continent-wide war that could be turned into a civil war, which of course didn't really happen until the war lasted too long. But yeah, I don't know. Marxist point of views on this are not Marx's point of view on this.
Right. Marx does seem to understand that the wars do have a tie to economic business cycles and crackdowns and elites. But we the one-to-one, the immiseration of the proletariat will lead to the revolution because of the economic propelling it. There's just no evidence for that. There isn't. If that was true, 1890 should have ended capitalism.
Right.
What was the rate of profit in capital in 1890?
It dropped precipitously.
Yeah, it was still way higher than what it is now, I think, even at the drop. The world rate of profit is probably something like 10% now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's going down. It's probably less now. The last stats that I've seen are about 2015. But so I think what we're going to see is as well, we're seeing a global low rate of profit emerge in most places.
Yeah, even China.
Profit. Even China. Yeah, China will
even
have
China.
China's had a lot.
The rate of
GDP
exploitation.
drop.
The rate of exploitation will be going down. It's inevitable, and so we're going to probably just I imagine a multipolarity of stuff coming out. That's
me too.
That's most likely because I think it would take 20 years to get a good revolutionary party, say, in the US, say a really good one. It'd probably take 20 years, right? And, unless it starts now, you're not going to
Yeah, it might be.
you're not going to
might be
see
too
something
late.
cycle. It's too late this
Yeah.
cycle, probably. But
Well, I think just to one last kind of go back to like how the end of the American Empire or whatever, and like how like changes of mode of production generally happen. I think one of the differences and one of the things that was unique about the transition from feudalism to capitalism is kind of like taking like a kind of cybernetic perspective. Like you had to add work into the system in order to make it become capitalism, to centralize it in that way is something that came to mind. Like I think part of that came through the economic changes, but also through the political clashes that came through the revolutions in France and England and the Americas.
Well, this is where like I'm not a total Brenner thesis person, but I think where Brenner has a point is England in particular had an incentive to reinvest into production after the enclosure movement in ways that other states which tried to do imperial extraction early, such as Spain, did not have the incentive to do. And that willingness to do reinvestment really does matter. That's the main difference. It's not like that like late feudal empires were like, dude, like Spain controlled, like had access to resources, the likes of which we don't even really understand, and yet it couldn't generate a profit generating mechanism. Like it just couldn't. Like they were at feudal profit modes. Like if you go look, it's like something like 1%. Like if you try to convert it into GDP, and all those historical conversions are questionable, but it's still like it's clearly super low. And so, whereas early English industrial capitalism had profit rates like the world had never seen. Like, so like that's a huge, as to why, I mean, that's an open question, but and it makes imperialism a lot more efficient, right? Like it's possible. But now, like, what can you even imperialize, really? Like, what can you bring capitalism even to? Like I guess maybe like miniature, like tiny, barely hanging on tribes in the middle of the Amazon. That's all you got left.
Yeah. Gonna send a mission to these Sentinelese. Good luck with that.
Yeah. I love that. They killed that guy. That was brilliant. They just stabbed him with a spear. Fucking brilliant. God, I love them guys. Right. Yeah. Oh my God. I've only really seen that there's a film by Scorsese about the Jesuit monks going to Japan. Has anybody seen that?
I've seen Silence.
Yeah. It's quite I think that's a very reactionary film. I really like the guy who played the total bastard Japanese kind of political guy who was torturing them was fucking brilliant actor. But it kind of reminds me of that. I would recommend watching it though. It's quite a decent film. If you
reactionaries make better movies generally. I hate to admit it, but
well, those are the only ones who get to make movies. Let's be honest.
We have Brecht.
Who? Brecht? Yeah. We've got one. Who's the English guy?
Oh, China Melville?
No. Is he a director now as well?
No, director. You mean
Ken Loach? Ken Loach. It's Ken Loach. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. I want to see Boots Riley make another movie.
Oh, that was quality. I like Boots. That was a fucking great film.
That was a good movie.
That was a great movie. We can all agree on that. Okay, let's go offline. We've been here for 2 hours.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's thank the chat.
Thanks to chat.
We killed Kyle.
We killed Kyle.
We're sorry, Kyle.
Okay, who do we got? We got Diazzi, Grimlock,
Red Tide. Will-eyed Oney. Very nice.
Every time. Pedro Alvarez, who said 18th premiere of Yo Mama. I like that one. There we go.
Nice. Jara Handala.
Yara.
Always dropping it with the with incredible like references in here. Apparently, Bunfeld on Ordolismos. Gotta check that out. Let's see.
Christopher Carroll.
Grimlock listing the red brown types in the in the
Yeah.
chat here.
Caleb Maupin. Spectral Theory. Who else do we have? I think that might be James Flynn, and
Hell yeah.
Christopher Carroll as well. There's
Hell
been
yeah.
a far right fucking demonstration in Dublin today. Some people got their heads bed in by them. And What is Politics?
Benjamin
okay.
Hanshow.
Benjamin.
Bringing the Gavin Newsom quotes. Constantine. What's up?
Oh yeah, Constantine as well. God, I'm blind. How did I miss all them? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
It's it's our old fans.
It's the fan.
Yeah.
It's this quite a small group of weirdos that we are all a part of. Let's go. We'll talk to you all soon.
Take care. Stay safe.
See ya. Bless up. See ya. Bye.